Yet when we come to the government of 1880 and the circumstances of 1881, 1882 and 1883, a change of opinion did find its way even into the cabinet. Some of us were what I should call not quite sound, and others of us were, and we all agreed that the best thing we could do was to refer the matter to this impartial tribunal. And when that tribunal reported, there was no improvement in the circumstances. If I am asked why, under these circumstances, I took part in throwing out the Channel Tunnel Bill, my answer is that we, the government, were engaged in arduous affairs. Powers were put very freely into action against us at that time, which are now happily in abeyance. We deemed that it was our duty to have some regard to the time of Parliament. We knew it was impossible to pass the bill. It was a time of tempest, and as sensible men in time of tempest are not satisfied with the shelter of an umbrella and seek shelter under the roof of some substantial building, so we acted. Whether or not we ought to have shown more heroism, I do not know, but we thought it idle to persevere in a hopeless struggle. We did not in the least condemn the tunnel on its merits. We did not think there was the slightest chance of proceeding with the bill to the end, and we therefore invited Parliament not to bestow its time on a discussion which we believed to be perfectly useless. That was the principle on which we proceeded at the time. I will say a little upon the arguments of the right honourable gentleman, but I am not going to attempt to follow those arguments as if we were engaged in a debate like that of last night. I do not think it would be expedient or convenient to make this a debate between both sides of the House. There are some on this side of the House who are probably unsound beside those who are usually so, and I hope there are some on that side who are sound, and therefore the House is totally without prejudice. But there is one thing which fell from the right honourable gentleman which I regret, and that was his comparison between the internal condition of France at the present time and the internal condition of France some 6 or 7 years ago. I own I think it was an error to enter upon the chapter of the subject, even if the right honourable gentleman entertains the opinion which he apparently does entertain. But as he has said that he thinks there is not the same prospect of stability in France now as then, I must give myself the satisfaction so far of expressing quite a different opinion. And I may remind the Government and the House of this, that the French Republic never, since 1870, has been called upon to pass through so severe a crisis as the crisis, not yet, I think, 12 months old, with respect to the appointment of a president. That was the most trying experience which it has had to go through, and it has made many of its friends and well-wishers tremble as to the issue. It made every sound and right-minded man in France apprehensive of what was to happen, and I rejoice to say that France and the institutions of France came through the struggle with as much calm temper and solidity as any country in the world could have done. That is one thing I feel it right to say in consequence of what fell from the right honourable gentleman. Following the right honourable gentleman opposite, I do not touch on the engineering question. Neither will I touch upon the commercial question, except to say frankly that I differ from the right honourable gentleman, and I believe the commercial advantages of this tunnel would be enormous. I have nothing whatever to do with engineering or commercial questions. I am here simply as a Member of Parliament to see whether there is any reason why I should withhold my assent to the plan. Now, sir, I have used the familiar illustration of the umbrella as shelter in a storm. After hearing the speech of the right honourable gentleman, I am not quite sure whether the storm is still going on, but I was under the impression that the panic had passed away. My impression has been, and in the main my impression is, that the literary alarm and the social alarm, which backed up by the military alarm, are very greatly allayed, and that we have now, what we had not 5 or 6 years ago, a chance of a fair, temperate, and candid discussion. The right honourable gentleman refers to a land frontier as if it were an unmixed evil. No doubt it is less secure upon the whole than a sea frontier, but he must not forget that a land frontier has enormous advantages with respect to intercourse between man and man, which are of great consequence in the view of those who believe that peace, and not war, is the natural condition in which we live with foreign countries. But on the question of procuring a land frontier, if it is a land frontier, which I do not think it is, the habitual and standing advantages of a land frontier are enormous compared with its occasional disadvantages and dangers. With regard to the political and military objections, I must say I feel pained, as an Englishman, in considering the extensive revolution of opinion that has taken place. For 20 years this project lived and flourished, difficult in an engineering sense, very difficult in a technical sense, and as a financial question. I do not presume to enter upon those questions, and I leave them to those who better understand them, but with no doubt cast on it from the point of view of the security of this country. Now, sir, a transition from darkness to light has taken place, and it ought to be hailed, notwithstanding all the inconveniences which accompany such transactions, and it is rather a serious question for us to consider whether the English nation and government from 1860 to 1880, or whether the influences which acted during the years 1883-4 and 1885, and which are to some extent acting now, lead us in the right or wrong direction. Speaking of the dangers of a land frontier, the right honourable gentleman, in a lugubrious manner, said that this end of the tunnel must always be the subject of great anxiety. Well, if this end of the tunnel is to be the subject of great anxiety, what will the other end be? But strange to say, I find that the other end of the tunnel is the subject of no anxiety at all. Many of us are in the habit of considering the French nation as light-minded, with great resources and great ingenuity, talents and ingenuity, but still light-minded, unlike ourselves, solid and stable, perhaps rather heavy, but at any rate a very steady-going people, who make up our minds slowly and resolutely, and do not change them. Oh, I am not speaking for myself, I am only speaking on behalf of my country, but I would ask honourable gentlemen to apply this test to the case of the French people. I must say that they have treated this matter with the most dignified self-restraint and consistency throughout. I am bound to give my opinion, and I think the French, had they any other than the most friendly disposition with regard to ourselves, might have made serious complaints of the manner of their treatment in having been invited to embark on this enterprise to an extent only short of the signature of the treaty, when we receded from the ground and left the light-minded people standing in exactly their original attitude, while we, not the nation but the government and the circles of opinion known in London, have very considerably altered. Well, but you will say, the question of our invading France is not a matter to be considered at all. Therefore, the other end of the tunnel does not seriously enter into the question. The real question that we have before us is the likelihood of the coming of that unhappy day. I agree it is a perfectly possible thing. I think and hope it is nothing more than a possible event. Still, it must be taken into consideration, when England will be invaded by France. I am very much behind the age in a great many respects, and I am sorry to say very much behind the representatives of the age who sit on the opposite side of the House, for I have the habit of being guided to a certain extent in anticipations of the future by considerations of the past. I know that it is a mode of looking at a subject entirely dismissed from consideration at present. For about 800 years, beginning from the Conquest, I want to know which country has oftenest invaded the other, and I will stake this proposition, that the invasions of France by England have been tenfold more than the invasions of the British Islands by France. Do you believe in a total revolution in the means of action between the two countries? I do not believe it. There has, indeed, been a great change in one matter, that of population. Now, sir, during the Revolutionary Wars, what happened? The great Napoleon, the most wonderful general and strategist of modern times, the man of whom Dr. Dollinger says that he raised war as to the mode of its planning and execution, not as to its morality, almost to the dignity and attitude of a fine art, addressed the whole of his resources and thoughts to the invasion of England. Ireland was tried 3 times by the Directory, and 3 times there were miserable failures. 2 other fleets had set out, one from Holland and one from Spain, and they had been destroyed by the power of British arms at sea. But Napoleon made a study nightly and daily to devise and arrange the means of invading England, and he was obliged to recede from it as an impossible task. Not that it is an impossible task. Do not suppose that I am going to say anything so extravagant. I am going to say this. It is worthwhile for those who have those portentous ideas of the power of France, and so small an idea of our means of defence, to consider the relative population of the two countries. At the time when Napoleon prosecuted his schemes, the population of Great Britain was 10 million. The population of France, 22 million. I will not count the population of Ireland, for at that period, unfortunately, as at others, it added nothing to the military resources of this country for repelling invasion. While 10 million Englishmen constituted the sum of those whom Napoleon had to invade, and he could not manage it. At the present moment this island contains far more than 30 million men, not less strong, not less determined, not less energetic than the 10 million in Napoleon's time at the beginning of the century, and they are close in mere numbers upon the population of France. Here, then, are 2 countries, and the question is whether one will invade the other by means of the Channel Tunnel. This is a country that has incessantly invaded France, and I am not sorry to say that though we did it with marvellous success 500 years ago, we have not always been equally successful in recent years, though there is the paramount case of 1815, with respect to which, if a parallel case could be quoted on the other side for the action of England and Wellington, I would admit that there would be something more in the argument of the right honourable gentleman than I can allow that it contained as matters stand. I shall be told that Napoleon had no steam. That appears to be a strong argument, but it is capable of being used both ways. I believe that the invention of steam and the great revolution that we have seen in shipbuilding have enormously increased our means of defence as compared with those of France. I believe that our defensive power in times of crisis would develop itself with a rapidity, to an extent, and with an efficiency that would surpass all previous examples, and would astonish the world. There is one question that I should like to ask. What is the ground taken up by those gentlemen who point to our security as the main matter which we have to consider? Do they mean, on that ground, to limit our communications with France? Do they mean, as in the time of Queen Anne, to abate our trade with France, as being a source of danger and insecurity? No, says the right honourable gentleman opposite, anything but it. Extend